Hi, I'm Diane Lockward. I'm the author of 4 collections of poetry and the editor of 3 books on the craft of poetry. I'm also the founder and publisher of Terrapin Books, which is a small press that publishes poetry books exclusively. I'd like to read to you today from my most recent book, which is The Uneaten Carrots of Atonement. I'm going to begin with the first poem in the collection, and this is the poem from which the title of the collection derives. Original Sin. When Karen told my father I'd pulled off my rabbit's tail, he asked, "Did you?" And I said yes, though in truth it was Karen who'd pulled the tail and tugged until it came loose in her hand. My father slapped me hard, said I'd been cruel, and asked why I'd done it. I confessed I didn't know and took the strap for Karen's crime. In the days and weeks that followed, I never questioned or accused Karen, and she never acknowledged what she'd done or apologized. We did not speak of her lie or mine. One morning at summer's end, I found my rabbit dead in her pen. Her sweet body, already stiff, lay among the uneaten carrots of atonement. And where the tail had been, an angry red circle, an accusing eye, reminded me of my deception. I wondered then, and wonder still, why I took the blame for hurting the pet I'd loved. I only know that once Karen said I'd done it, and my father looked at me as if I had. I was guilty as those unbaptized babies in purgatory. I must have understood, even then, that I'd been born bad, and the only reason I hadn't pulled off my rabbit's tail was because Karen got it first. Some part of me, the part already destined for hell, had wanted that soft talisman that promised luck, had wanted it in my own hand, and wished I'd moved faster. This next poem is one I wrote sometime after learning that a plum pudding, in fact, has no plums at all in it. We were such a fine plum pudding. Temptation it is to read your spread palm, the abbreviated lifeline and bad fortune, as palm to palm we are no more, nor plum to plum. Such a fine pudding we made, the long, slow steam to perfection, the struck match, the two of us drenched in cognac and served in a blaze. And oh, the very texture of us, so dark we're almost black, and dear God, so sinfully rich, currants inside us plump and sweet, and clotted cream like a moat around the base. Yet the proof was in us, at the heart, not a coin hidden, but a snake coiled. The old story again, paradise at hand, a man, a woman, a fruited tree. Only plum this time, perhaps for variety, or so we thought. In truth, merely the illusion of plums, our pudding misnamed and false, overbaked and ruined. My moist plum dried up, your poor plum shriveled. A plumless pudding, after all. My next poem is one that begins with a question. Sometimes when I find that I have nothing to write about, I don't have a topic to get started on, if I begin with a quirky question, that will lead me into a poem. It doesn't always work, but sometimes it does. The morphology of mushrooms. When my young son asks, "What's a mushroom?" I tell him his face, his belly, his thighs. I touch each spongy part of him with my finger. He is deep into wonderland, knows Alice and the caterpillar, and hungers for more. I give him edible fungus and nibble a toe. I give him raised on a farm or wild in the forest, nourished by worms and redolent of iron. I give him the fruiting body, spore-bearing and fleshy, and under the dome a network of blade-like gills, delicate as lace, fragile as a spider's web. Squat tree, rubber umbrella, one-legged stool, and on the lawn, ephemeral as a magic trick. Here in the morning, then the swift farewell. I give him fairy wing, porcini, hen of the woods, food for royalty, ancient promise of immortality. I do not give him atomic plume or the locket, mist of death cap hidden inside, one dab on the lips, another kind of goodbye. Tonight I slip the music of mushrooms into his mouth. Chanterelle, Portobello, Morel. This next poem is in a particular form known as rimus dissolutus, which means dissolving rhyme. If you follow the rhyme scheme as you're writing, the result will be a poem with a pretty subtle rhyme scheme. So as you're listening to me read this poem, you might notice the rhymes. Then again, you might not notice the rhymes because they're subtle. For the love of avocados, I sent him from home, hardly more than a child. Years later, he came back loving avocados. In the distant kitchen, where he'd flipped burgers and tossed salads, he'd mastered how to prepare the pear-shaped fruit. He took a knife and plied his way into the thick skin with a bravado and gentleness I'd never seen in him. He nudged the halves apart, grabbed a teaspoon, and carefully eased out the heart, holding it as if it were fragile. He took one half, then the other of the armadillo-hided fruit, and slid his spoon where flesh edged against skin, working it under and around, sparing the edible pulp. An artist working at an easel. He filled the center holes with chopped tomatoes. The broken pieces, made whole again, merged into two reconstructed hearts, a delicate and rare surgery. My boy, who'd gone away angry and wild, had somehow learned how to unclose what had once been shut tight, how to urge out the stony heart and handle it with care. Beneath the rind, he'd grown as tender and mild as that avocado, its rubies nestled in peridot, our forks slipping into the buttery texture of unfamiliar joy, two halves of what we shared. I'm going to end up with a poem that I call an odd jobs poem. I'd given myself the task of writing a poem about an odd job. And the odd job that I located, which struck me as the most appealing, was the one of professional chocolate taster. And I thought, what a delightful way to spend one's working years, tasting chocolate. For the chocolate tasters who sit around all day eating bonbons, whose mission is to empty each fluted cup day after day in pursuit of the perfect truffle, whose nights are filled with dreams of ganache, who do not count calories or fret the heart attack, diabetes, or cavities, but push forward to the next confection, who make a virtue of falling to temptation, these Epicureans of chocolate, who never say, "I've had enough," but like Olympic athletes persevere and savor the literal taste of sweet success, who worship the chocolatiers as they would gods, and study the science of chocolate, how to hold up a piece to the light, to inspect for sheen and the slight fissure, how to snap it and listen for the crack that signals perfection, how to soften a Belgian treat with the teeth and not chew, who train like sommeliers to master the bunny sniff, to breathe in the aroma notes, and show up at work each day with a whiff of expectation, who practice the fine art of slow eating, grateful for each one of the 8,000 taste buds on the tongue, the hypersensitive palate, steadfast in their refusal to rush joy. Okay, thank you for listening. I've been reading to you today from The Uneaten Carrots of Atonement. It's available at Amazon.com or Barnes & Noble online, or you can order it from your favorite bookstore. Or you can go to my website, DianeLockward.com, and get more information there. Before I close, I'd like to thank Ethan Galvin, our librarian at the West Caldwell Library, for hosting this virtual poetry reading series and for always making our library such a friendly place for poetry. Okay, thanks again for listening. Bye.